Hey guys, Arleesha here, and welcome to another video. Today we're going to be jumping back into our limited palettes series, and I'm going to be talking about a color combination that feels very classic and traditional to watercolors and something that I have come to love over recent years, and that's the combination of, to put it broadly, brown and blue. I think the most notable and known combination of these two colors would be burnt sienna and French ultramarine. I'm going to be showing you two different variants of that classic example, starting with a pair of colors by Daniel Smith. I had previously thought that my French ultramarine might have gotten tainted by the phthalo blue that was in the well next to it, and after this initial swatch, that was definitely confirmed. That was not a pure French ultramarine. There was definitely some phthalo blue that had gotten mixed into there when I had moved it out of the well next door, so I cleared out that well and refilled it with fresh paint, fresh ultramarine blue, and swatched a proper swatch for you. Those two colors are interesting together though. So alright, now we are working with pure French ultramarine and transparent brown oxide as opposed to that standard burnt sienna. I really love transparent brown oxide. It's such a warm, rich brown, and the one by Daniel Smith is just really, really gorgeous. When mixing a brown and blue like this, you get such gorgeous, beautiful, neutral colors, and that French ultramarine granulates so beautifully, and it's just absolutely lovely. This deep, moody blue that comes from mixing a small amount of brown in is like one of my favorite colors to mix. I think it's just really, really gorgeous and puts you right in that sort of indigo Payne's gray area, and it's just so lovely to work in these tiny little variants. The next combination I want to show you is actually from my M. Graham palette here. Now, my M. Graham palette and my Daniel Smith palette are very similar in the fact that I haven't used them very much lately, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that when I got these two sets of paints, like when I was putting together individual tubes of these paints I wanted, I didn't know very much about myself as a painter, and I didn't know a ton. I mean, I had a base of knowledge about paints and pigments and things, and I just kind of picked colors based on what I thought I would like or based on what other people were using, and I ultimately ended up with a range of colors that doesn't suit me very well currently, right now. So maybe someday I'll do like an overhaul of the paints I have by these brands so that I can actually use them more. I think that would be really beneficial, but I haven't taken the time to sit down and make lists of what I do want and to see what I have and see what I still would want or need from those brands. The two M. Graham colors we're looking at today are Indian Throne Blue and Quinacridone Rust. So this is a slightly different pairing here. Indian Throne Blue is a much warmer blue, it doesn't granulate, and Quinacridone Rust, while initially looking like a really rich, warm, burnt sienna type color, it's made with PO48, which is an orange pigment, so it has a lot of that warmth and yellowness to it. So when it's mixed with this blue, some of the colors are actually sort of mossy, desaturated greens. And this combination is a little bit more complementary because we've got a blue and an orange, and the way that they mix is just super unique. I was really feeling the M. Graham paints this time around, so I decided to go with those two. I kind of surprised myself in that way because I thought for sure I would go with those moody blues, but instead decided to lean towards something that ultimately makes slightly warmer, more green colors. I mentioned this previously, perhaps in a live stream that I've been doing something a little bit different with sketching. I've definitely learned over time that I prefer to sketch directly onto my watercolor paper. It can be a little bit of a messier process, so I always try to do a thumbnail first and have an idea of what it is that I want to draw or paint, so that's always helpful. But the sketching process is always a bit messy, where you have to make changes and make corrections, but I still really prefer it to trying to transfer my sketch. I never like the sketch as much if I transfer it with a light box or try to use tracing paper or something like that. I've also been experimenting with leaving my sketch lines a little bit darker. I did lighten these ones up a bit ultimately, but I left those lines pretty prominent and pretty sketchy, and I kind of like how those show through in the end. I had gotten a question previously about how I keep my graphite sketch, because I am using, a standard mechanical pencil here to sketch, how I keep that sketch from getting muddy and messy and having those lines make a mess when I start painting. And when I move into my watercolors, I try to use big, broad, loose strokes to start and get as much of that graphite wet as possible. You could also achieve the same thing by just laying down a wash over the whole piece of clean water and just letting it dry. And what that does is it kind of locks in the graphite, and afterwards it's almost like it's just underneath a layer and it doesn't move around as much, and that's really helpful if you want to sketch with a graphite pencil. For a long time I had been using colored pencils, like erasable colored pencils, usually like the Prismacolor Kohl Erase, for my sketches, because I liked how the pink and red and orange blended into skin tones when you would paint over them. But I was having some issues with the pencils feeling a bit waxy, and they were kind of difficult to erase. Even though they are erasable colored pencils, they're not completely erasable. So for me, working in sketching directly onto my watercolor paper, I needed something that I could erase efficiently without putting too much pressure and, too much strain on my watercolor paper. So the graphite pencil has just been working really nicely for me lately. So I have kind of weird mixed feelings about this painting. On the day I did the sketch and started painting, I wasn't feeling very well, like emotionally, mentally, and I decided that I was going to experiment with painting a sort of different emotion. I do lots of, I guess we can use the term blank stares when it comes to paintings, but I still try to communicate emotion in my work, but I do it a lot more subtly, usually. And I have never really been able to say exactly why that is lately. I just know that I generally like the way that I work and the way that I convey emotion through my work without necessarily always using super strong expressions. And this piece kind of taught me why I do that. There's just a touch more emotion in the expression on this character, and ultimately, it kind of stresses me out. I know that's kind of a weird thing to say. The piece was really fun, and I'm so glad that I did it, and it was a fantastic experiment in using this limited palette of these two colors. But when I look at it, it reminds me so strongly of how I felt when I did that initial sketch. And I often talk about how I can't paint when I'm not feeling motivated to paint, and oftentimes that's tied to my mental state. So if I'm not feeling well, if I'm feeling anxious or stressed or sad, I oftentimes can't paint at all. But for some reason, this was like a strange occurrence where I was really motivated and inspired to paint and wanted to communicate some of what I was feeling, but now it just feels like too much. You know what I mean? It feels a bit too intense in the case of this piece, and I wonder what you guys will think of it. So let me know, when you see the finished piece, if it feels intense to you. I don't know. It's not even that the expression is that overwhelming. It's still pretty gentle and subtle, and I don't know, but there's something about it that just feels like almost it kind of feels like looking in a mirror onto that specific day, but also as though it's like magnified, like I'm looking into one of those like magnification mirrors and I'm seeing my tiny sad pores really close up or something weird. I don't know, but it just feels strange to me. But I had a lot of fun experimenting with these two colors, even though the purpose of doing this limited palette series was to show you guys how much can be accomplished with a limited palette. And so far we've just been working with two colors, and how much of a wide range you can get from just 2 colors, I am still surprised every time. And especially in this case where I'm using colors that are from a palette that I haven't used very much at all lately. And I was surprised by how much this piece leaned into that greenish area. I didn't think that I would use the quinacridone rust on its own this much, but the color is so versatile. Quinacridone rust in mass tone can get pretty dark and pretty rich and lean closer to brown, but as you water it down and lighten it, it just has such a magnificent range all on its own. And the more I played with it and the more I allowed little bits of that to shine through, the more I just wanted more of it all over the place. So it was a lot of fun to play with. These M-Gram watercolors really do feel like something special. They're so rich and so saturated, and just the tiniest touch of the brush gives you so much paint and so much color. It can be a little overwhelming and seem like it's difficult to control all of that paint. You know, when I first got into it, that's definitely how I felt. It's like when you're driving a car that has a really sensitive brake, and every time you even just tap on the brake, the car jerks. So that's kind of how it felt at first using these paints. Like I just had to barely tap my brush into the pan or the well, and I had so much color. So that was fun, and I feel like it does give more intensity and more power to the finished painting. It's kind of one of those experiences where it leans a little bit more gouache-like, just in the intensity of the color, not even if not necessarily the opacity. If you're interested in purchasing the original for this piece, you can find it for sale on my shop. Let me know if you guys would be interested in prints of this one as well, and I can put those up too. This piece will be featured in this month's real-time video over on Patreon. So if you guys are interested in seeing the real-time version of this with a Q&A, it's going to be a special Q&A, which I'm really excited about. My husband's going to be joining me, so he's going to be answering questions with me this month, which is really exciting, and my patrons are sending in their questions now, you know, any questions that they have for me or for him or for both of us. So I'll leave a link to all of that related stuff down in the description of this video. And very soon, maybe by the time this video comes out, those sorts of things will be available to more than just patrons. So just in case I haven't made that video yet, I won't go into all of the details. But anyway, fun stuff coming, exciting stuff coming. I like the dripping, oozing effect that I went with here. It's, I don't know, it just feels really intense to me, and it is, ultimately, I can look back on it on a really effective snapshot. I talk about that a lot in sketchbooks, how I don't always feel the need to make my sketchbooks look perfect because I feel like the individual pages are a snapshot of where I was at the time. And this painting feels like that so strongly, like just a representation of where I was at on one particular day. And for that reason, it feels really special. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Thank you for taking the time to watch it and hang out with me a little bit. If you're interested in the original, you can check out the link to my shop down below. The real-time video will be on Patreon very soon, and that's going to be a special Q&A. And I will talk to you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Okay, bye-bye.